Hey, everybody, and welcome to another weekly edition of All Aboard's newsletter. And so, with all of the change in the air, with all of the things going on for all types of insurance agents, not only in the captive space, but the independent space as well, I wanted to take a moment to talk about a topic that I think is probably top of mind for a lot of people out there, and certainly top of mind for me, is I wanted to talk about how do we implement change in our business in a way that doesn't cause panic, right? So we know that there are good and bad ways to implement change. And, some of us have experienced some really poor ways to implement change as we are dealing with our own changes that we can't control. Other people are getting changes that are handled extremely well. And so I wanted to take a beat and talk through that today. Okay. So what do we think we need to do when we get started? Well, number one is we need to explain the problem. What is the reason that we have to do something, right? We have to understand that if nothing changes and that we continue on this way, it's not going to be good. So the way that you want to talk about it, right, is you need to communicate with your team and you need to tell them, how did we get here? What went wrong? What mistakes did we make to get here that is now saying, hey, we need to change, or what changed externally in ways that we can't control where we have to now adapt. Okay, so that's number one. It's how did we get here? And number two is, where is the problem coming from? Is it self-inflicted? Because if it's a self-inflicted problem, well, then we need to talk about how we put systems, processes, and solutions in place to make sure these mistakes don't happen again and that we don't have to make wholesale changes. If the problems are coming externally, right, what we need to do is we need to understand that. And even if we can't control the changes that are coming externally, we can try to build a way to insulate ourselves from future changes, okay? And so one of the things I just want to take a note of here is that if the change is being required because we had self-inflicted mistakes or self-inflicted problems, I have two pieces of recommendations for you, and I'll put them in the newsletter itself. But it's important to do two things. One is this idea of a post-mortem or a pre-mortem. So basically what happens is when something goes wrong, you can stop and say, hold on, let's break this thing down. What went wrong and how do we prevent it from happening again? That is a post-mortem. Post happened after. But as you do this exercise more and more and more, you might implement something called a pre-mortem. And what that means is it's when you are about to make a change and you pause and you say, hold on a second. What could go wrong? And why will it go wrong? And how do we get ahead of it going wrong? Or maybe it will go wrong, but if it does go wrong, we have a quick plan to deal with it and react, okay? So post and pre-mortems are really, really, really good tools to work on this, okay? The second thing that I want to recommend is this idea of second order thinking. Second order thinking is a mindset. It is a habit to get in. Basically what it says is, how do we think about the cause and effect or the unintended consequences of the things that we're making? People respond to incentives, okay? And so every time we're putting something in place, whether it's a change for the better or the worse or whatever it is, we always try to ask ourselves, what might happen because of this that we are not thinking about? Okay, so that's second order thinking. The third and most important step when we're talking about change is to be honest. Be honest about what is happening here. Don't say it's one thing when it's really something else. That just insults people's intelligence. If the change is bad, or perceived to be bad, trust is going to go from here all the way down to here, okay? And so you're going to have to know that you have to get that trust back, all right? So explain how you got there, help understand where the problem's coming from, and be honest with people. I think there's like this comment, like, don't piss on them and call it rain. Just be honest what it is. If, you're making a change because you want the agency to be more profitable so you can make more money, be honest about it, right? It's not going to be popular, but be honest about it. If you are making a change because of an external thing that a carrier that you work with did, be honest about that, right? So that's number one, explain the problem. So step number two is set the stage, okay? Set the stage for the change. So tell them why we are changing. And you might think to yourself, you might say, well, isn't this the same thing as the last step? No. Why are we changing? Because when things happen externally to us, or we recognize that something needs to change, we still have a choice. We still have a choice on whether or not we want to make that change. Do we want to carry on the same way that we've been carrying on, or do we want to go ahead and change? So if we are going to change, let's talk about why we are changing. And most importantly, what happens if we don't change? What are the consequences if we don't change? I think everybody always wants to say, well, if we make this change, these are all the things that are going to happen. And that's great. It helps people to see a vision, but sometimes pain can be a bigger motivator than, reward, pleasure, or leisure, or any of these things. And so it's important to talk about both of these. What happens if we don't change? If we don't change, revenue drops. And if revenue drops, profit drops. And if profit drops, that means there's no year-end bonuses or no profit sharing or this or that. Or we can't spend as much money on marketing, or we can't hire as many people. Or, you know what, I know you want a 4-day work week, and that's always been a maybe for us, but it's not even a maybe anymore. It's an impossible. So what happens if we don't change, okay? And then lastly, why is it important for them and the agency? I think we have this tendency as leaders sometimes in our agencies to say, look, this is what the agency needs, and we've got to do it. We've all got to be on board for the agency. But it's also really, really imperative that you talk about why it's important for that individual rep as well. Because if you're not talking about what's in it for them, it might not land, right? We are selfish creatures, just inherent in some people more so than others. And I think a lot of people try not to be that way, but we always think about ourselves, and that's just our own evolution and DNA. It's like we all want to self-preserve. And so we always say, what does this mean for me? There are very few selfless people out there. I think they call them saints, right? So, okay, next step, how to change. How do we actually do the change? Okay, so this is something that I've got a lot of experience with. I've been at Allstate for about 10 years. I've been an agency owner for 6.5 years. Been in insurance since 2013, and seen a lot of change in the last 10, 11 years, okay? And so sometimes you have to pivot, and you have to pivot hard. And what I have realized over the years that the most effective change happens when you are inviting the people that these changes affect into the process. So I could sit down with a piece of paper or, my executive team and put together a plan, and it can be great, and we can agree with it, and we can love it, and we can roll it out to the team. And it doesn't mean that it won't work. What would work even better, though, is saying, hey, these are the people it affects. Let's do some focus groups. Let's sit down and have some little conversations. Here's what we're thinking. What do you think? And it goes back to me on one of these situations I had. I remember changing my CRM all the way back in 2015, and I was having a really hard time getting my team to use the CRM. And the guy who we paid to help us build it, made a suggestion. He's like, why don't you ask the team what they want or what they think? And so basically what we were trying to decide is, in what order should we call our pipeline? And so we kind of put everything on the board, and I had people come in and we talked through it. They ranked them. They said why they believed what they believed. And guess what? Rolled it out. They were in on the process, and they helped with it, right? So that's really, really important, is invite people into the change process, ask for their opinion, ask for their help. Not only will they come up with good ideas, but it takes some of the burden off of you, okay? Next is find a few champions. These are people who are going to buy in and believe and pull the sleigh from the front, right? There's always going to be the people who resist. There's always going to be the people who kind of wait. And then there's going to be a few people who are champions who can bring you forward and help lead from the front, okay? So find a few champions who can help you implement this change. The next one is set on a plan and a rollout date. The more notice you can give people to prepare, the better it's going to be. When you make a change and you give them 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, like that might feel like enough in a small environment, but if you can give them 2 months or 3 months, 6 months, even better. And if it's a really big change, give them a year. And that sounds crazy, I know, because we're a small business, but if I know in 2026 I'm going to make a wholesale change to the agency, it's only fair to let people know well ahead of time, okay? So the last one is don't boil the frog. This is so important when it comes to change, right? I think sometimes people say, well, you know what, I'm just gonna do little hits, right? And that way they don't get too upset, and then they'll calm down, and then I'll do the next thing and the next thing. Don't do that. If it's bad, rip off the Band-Aid. Just do it all at once. If it's good, go ahead and stretch it out. Because what happens, people say, well, I don't want to just do a little bit, or as I don't want it to be I don't want it to be too upsetting. So I'm just going to do a little bit here, a little bit there. And really what we're doing is we're being selfish, right? We don't want it to be upsetting and people quit or people leave or people give up. That's us thinking about what we need. That's not us being a good partner to whoever it is that we're working with. So if it's bad, rip the Band-Aid off. Let people deal with the shock, the awe, let them make their choices, but then it gives them time to get back on track and roll. If we are changing things every quarter, every 6 months, every year, and it's just moving the wrong direction, you're just spreading the pain out. People are just kind of like more consistently pissed off than if they were really pissed off for a couple days and moved on. Now they're just pissed off all the time, okay? So that's number 3. And the last step is keep your focus, okay? Keep your focus. I think sometimes we put together these grand New Year plans. We're really, really good on them for a month, and then we forget, okay? Have a plan to go through this month by month by month and measure your progress. Remind people early and often. People need to hear things 20, 30, 40 times. And researchers, 3 times, 5 times. No. Tell them every day. If you want people writing 3 lines, talk about 3 lines every single day. If you want people asking for referrals, talk about referrals every single day, okay? It's important as well to adjust as your goal, right? Don't be rigid, be flexible. If something's not working, tweak. Don't make big changes because that just stresses people out and you never get anywhere. You've got to give time for your plans to work, but you can make little adjustments, right? If you're headed north and you go a little bit to, northwest, great. A little bit to the northeast, great. But don't start north and go west, then east, then back north, right? It's just stressful. And last is check in with your team. Ask things how they're going. Continue to get their feedback and their help, okay? So I hope that these steps help you implement your own change in your agency that I'm confident so many of you out there are going to make. As always, if you have any questions, any concerns, need any help, just shoot me an email back to this newsletter. Thank you so much. Next week is Christmas, so Merry Christmas if you celebrate it. Happy New Year. I'll have one more newsletter edition out. But thank you guys so much for following along and watching the video, and let me know what you think. Thanks so much. Bye.